Hello, one and all, and welcome back to the Fractal channel. I know it has been quite a long time since the last upload here, but now I'm back and better than ever. If you read the title, you may be wondering what the Endercraft SMP is. Well, to put it simply, it's just another standard SMP. No more, no less. I won't lie and pretend it's anything unique. However, Minecraft is what you make it, and I intend to make this season special through the friendships formed, the creativity of my builds, and the pranks which will inevitably be put into action. One note before we get started is that for the entirety of this first episode, and probably some of the next, my microphone was not set up properly in the recording software, so unfortunately that means you'll be stuck with the narrator version of me. But hopefully I will be sufficient in journaling this adventure. Anyway, let's get into it. Me and the rest of the server started at spawn with no items to our name, no world to explore, and only bloodthirsty vigor rushing through our veins as we repeatedly killed one another for heads. It was a bloodbath. But this didn't last long. Suddenly, all at once, the gates were thrown wide and we were loosed on the world. My plan was simple, in theory. I was going to upgrade to full diamond as quickly as possible for my own convenience's sake, and then spend hours alone building a base like a true recluse. I'd done it dozens of times in the past. There was only one problem. I had no idea what my base was going to be yet. So, while I waited for my brain fog to thin and for an elusive spark to form between my two neurons, I headed to the mines. Looking back, I can only cringe at the misery that awaited me down below. Like Dante descending into the first ring of hell, these mines should have been accompanied by a warning. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. But I ignored this warning, guided by a desire for riches, spurred on by the faint glimmer of iron which waited in the depths. At first, it all went swimmingly. The cave was full of valuable loot. Iron was embedded into every surface. It wasn't long before I was rich. But there was one problem. The cave was full of dangerous mobs, and due to my haste in getting into the mines, I had no food with which to sustain myself. So every piece of damage I took was permanent, unable to be healed. I did not care. I continued mining, wasting no time, but this hubris would catch up to me sooner or later. I saw, in the darkness of a pit with flowing lava, glimmering diamonds, and instantly my eyes were clouded with greed. I dived after them, not realizing that in the process the lava was now changing its course, coming for me. I panicked. And in that moment, already weakened from a lack of food, distracted by riches, I fell to my death. And just like that, everything was gone. I made an attempt to retrieve my items, but it was of no use. My attempt had ended in failure, as did the next. And when I was finally okay with starting over, getting a wood pickaxe, then a stone one, and grinding back some iron, that also meant nothing in the face of death. Again, and again, and again. Every death, meaning another 30 minutes wasted, and I could do nothing but continue to die. Eventually I managed to get some diamonds and survive with them, so I cut my losses and gave up, taking the little I had to the surface. This world was not meant for a man like me. I had gotten the hint. All of that death had, for better or worse, given me time to find inspiration for my base. I wanted to build a cyberpunk boardwalk bar with multi-storied buildings on a rickety dock. The problem was, I needed an ocean to bring my dream to reality. And not just any ocean, but one with a sizable cliffside that was in a normal biome. No mangrove swamp or jungle, which seemed to be the only biomes around spawn that fit my criteria. I spent hours trekking through those swamps looking for anything that might be suitable for a base, only to come up empty. So, like Jules at the end of Pulp Fiction, I began walking the earth. Finally, after over an hour of hiking, boating, and swimming, I found the perfect place. What I didn't realize at the time was that just a few hours prior, I was literally right here and somehow did not notice that this was the perfect place to build. But alas, I noticed it now, and I was ready to get started. The terrain matched exactly what I'd imagined in my head, the biome was right, and a small river connected the build site to spawn. It was perfect. So I placed down my bed and a chest to store my limited number of items, and got to gathering materials for my building. First and foremost, I was going to need spruce wood. A lot of it. So, with my single spruce sapling as a foundation, I grew a spruce empire. Before long, I had more wood than I knew what to do with. But there was more. I would need an assortment of miscellaneous materials for the build I had planned, and 2 in particular, warped and crimson wood, would require me to go to the Nether. So I bit the bullet and started mining in search of a lava pool. It wasn't long before I found one and set up a rudimentary portal. But before braving the Nether, I wanted to not only gear up a little bit better so I didn't lose everything yet again, but also begin checking off some of the other materials I would need. First and foremost, I hit the mines in search of copper. It wasn't particularly difficult to find. Then, I started making some mud from water bottles and dirt, before converting this into packed mud and then mud bricks. Finally, I returned to the jungle near spawn to gather some jungle logs. While I was in the spawn region, I had some time to wander around and tour a couple of early bases and saw something surprising. No matter where I went, I kept seeing the same sign in everyone's base. Crafting table repossessed by International Ping Bank. Strange. I paid this no mind at the time and went on my way, not knowing that soon, Ping Bank would be paying me a visit. But that can wait until later. For now, all that was on my mind was venturing into the Nether to get the last of my materials. I wasn't looking forward to this journey. It seemed like a prime opportunity for all of my hard work to go to waste, for me to lose everything I had grinded for yet again. But all I was getting in this first stage was crimson wood, which grew right next to my portal. A quick trip in and out. Nothing more, nothing less. I was fearless. I was strong. And above all else, I could do this. But fear not. One long trip all the way from spawn where I had accidentally slept later, and a few more deaths in the Nether in the process, and I had all of my stuff back. Now, all that remained on my bucket list was warped wood. After a bit of journeying, I spotted the blue trees in the distance, carefully bridging my way over to them, and chopped them down one by one. Each tree a reminder that my goal was growing nearer and nearer. And finally, this time without any death, I managed to collect my materials and make it home safely, before finally being able to begin construction on what would be my first build. The plan was simple. This would be a 2-story cyberpunk building. The top floor would connect to the upper level on top of my hill, while the second floor would be accessible from the boardwalk below, both entrances facing opposite directions. Separating the layers, I added a border of mud bricks and formed a balcony which spanned the building's upper level. Then, using the same mud bricks, I established a small path out front of the upper level. I worked on the facade for a bit, along with the roof, using what little copper had oxidized enough, before bringing a bee home? I could have been doing anything else, but I was bringing a bee home. Okay. Anyway, after that detour, I expanded my copper oxidation setup so that I could eventually finish the roof within a reasonable time span. Now, it was time for the lower floor. My plan was to have this be some kind of sushi bar, and I set about on building the exterior walls using a mixture of stripped crimson stems, crimson planks, and purple terracotta made from clay in the river near my house. I added a small little awning thing which would later be replaced by a better one, and then got to work on the boardwalk. I used the same technique as was seen in my dock from the Outcast SMP. Spruce trapdoors and campfires worked together to create a rickety wooden texture. I also used the spruce trapdoors to build up a storefront standing bar for the sushi restaurant. Now, it is time for me to briefly interrupt this building montage, for while I was building, I was receiving some interesting messages from a member of the server. Allow me to introduce you to Zarkanacine. Zark, as I will probably call him from now on, messaged me asking to meet at spawn to talk. And truthfully, I found this a bit suspicious. Endercraft is an SMP which emphasizes peace, but I still felt on edge while making the journey to spawn. What didn't make things better was the fact that after arriving, he was nowhere to be seen, and said he got lost on the way. Something didn't add up. When he finally arrived, he seemed a bit disoriented. Unfortunately, our actual conversation wasn't recorded because of the aforementioned microphone issues, but don't worry, I'm here to explain what happened. He asked me if I knew any location with a taiga island on which he could build. I told him that there happened to be one near my base, and he suggested we stop by on the way. Little did I know, I was following his plan perfectly. When we arrived at my base, I noticed right away what had happened. There was a new sign that hadn't been there when I left, right where my crafting table used to sit. And as expected, it said, my crafting table had been repossessed by Ping Banks. And the pieces started falling into place in my mind. The reason why Zark wanted to meet me at spawn, why he wanted me away from my base, the reason why he was late. He must have been waiting until I left to make his move and steal my crafting table. Then he lured me back past my base, knowing full well that there was a taiga island beyond. He wanted me to see his handiwork. It all made too much sense. but I wasn't certain yet. I had to pretend I was fooled and played on the down low, trying to do some detective work. I immediately replaced my crafting table, then pretended to look away, waiting. And almost immediately he fell for my trap. You can't hear me say any words here, but I knew exactly what was going on, despite Zark's attempts to convince me otherwise. And before I could fully call him out, he disappeared, having been caught in the act. I had enough of the crafting table shenanigans and decided to continue work on my build. I slowly worked on the roof and the interior as I collected the necessary blocks and my copper decided to oxidize. I installed a lovely AC unit on the side of the bottom floor, held up by an iron trap door and funneling air through a pipe to the upper floor. Power is received by the chains, which represent wires. Next, I added one of my favorite aspects of the build, the antenna. I don't know why, but giant antennas just feel so cyberpunk slummy to me. Crooked and barely held up, usually connected to hundreds of wires, decrepit. And while I couldn't add the wires due to Minecraft's limitations, I did my best to make the antenna add character to the build. I added a gradient to the antenna using spruce and dark oak fences in combination with nether brick fences, as if the light at the top is shining down. I really like it. Now is when I finally got around to fixing that ugly awning. I decided I wanted it to protrude from the building. At first I tried to keep the original mud brick design, but it just wasn't working. So I switched to alternating jungle and spruce slabs, which ended up being the right call. I finally had enough oxidized copper to finish the roof, so I did exactly that. Now all that was left were the interiors. To make the build seem small and cramped, the floor plan ended up being only 3x3. But truthfully, I really enjoyed the challenge of not only making this accessible, but also visually interesting with the limited space. Even now, the interior of the upper floor isn't fully done, as there are a couple difficult to acquire blocks that I'd like to place around, but I like the way it turned out even in this unfinished state. Finally, I added the signs to both stores. The top was named Sanaz Magical Crystal Emporium, and was themed around a shady crystal magic shop, which, in all likelihood, is peddling scams. The bottom store was initially named Mishi Sushi Bar, but I later changed this to Yuhodo, which translates to Boardwalk. Later I make some katakana banners to spell out the name, but that won't be included here. And for the final touches, I improved the look of the boardwalk using the aforementioned campfires and by texturing the trapdoors, before building support logs for the dock and texturing them to make the bottoms look wet using a mixture of dark oak and spruce. While the build has been improved in small ways since, this is the state I'll show it in for the final reveal. Even incomplete, I feel as though I captured the vibe I was going for perfectly. It truly does look best on a rainy night, which was exactly the weather I envisioned this build being experienced in. Now that I was done building, I decided it would be the ideal time to go on a side quest for a member of the server, Sir Bork. Sir Bork was living in the desert far north of Spawn, and they were barren lands. Like an Oblivion NPC, he put out a help-wanted request for fresh meat, specifically live cows. Anyone who could bring him 2 live cows would be given a stack of pearlescent frog lights, and this was not a reward I could afford to pass up on. There were plenty of cows around my base after all, but there was only one problem. His base was thousands of blocks north of mine, and rather than transport a cow all of that way, I naively figured that I would have an easier time finding one in his vicinity. Oh, how wrong I was. For the next hour and a half, I roamed the northern deserts in search of any bovine, any at all. None were to be found, not even in the fertile grasslands. I searched far and wide, and soon was at risk of dying of heat stroke and thirst. But I did not give up. Over 1,000 blocks from his base, I finally spotted one. A beautiful milky mammal. But that was the problem. I spotted only one. So after spending 30 minutes guiding this cow across the perilous seas and deserts, I was still only half complete with my mission. But I would not rest until I fulfilled my promise. I traveled east this time, another 1,000 blocks, till reaching a village where a farmer had a cow. I shamelessly tore down his fence and stole it for my own benefit, boating it away and ruining that farmer's livelihood. I did not care. For upon returning the cow to Sir Bork, he graciously kept up his end of the bargain like any good side quest NPC, and I collected my stack of frog lights. As I left the town, I saw a sign. "Welcome to Dusty Village," it said. We are slowly starving. And I sighed, knowing that in the end I had done a good deed, even if that villager had just put out a warrant for my arrest. And I returned home satisfied with my accomplishments. Well, that's all I have for today. It's a shame that my in-game microphone wasn't recording, because there were really some funny moments that I would have loved to have shown you, and when I realized that none of them actually recorded it, I was kind of pissed off, I'm not gonna lie. Oh well, it is what it is. Next time, I will have some to share, this I can promise. I have big plans for my base, and for this server. I know I always say this, and yet nothing ever comes of it, but I'm hoping to get the chance to build my vision and have some fun along the way. If that sounds interesting to you, then do me a favor and subscribe. It helps me a lot, and it'll keep you up to date with the series. More should be coming in the near future. Anyway, that's all. This is Fractal, and until next time, see ya.